Happy 420 and welcome to the Worst Wrestling Podcast.
Oopsie, the worst rapper alive. Oops. Yeah. Big Mac's back on the mic like oops. Back on the horse, still jumping through hoops. A missing link in pink, I don't lip sync. Just to be clear, choking isn't my kink, but I do it anyway sometimes, I guess. Gotta laugh now, die later in my times of stress. I'm blessed, feeling good, charged up like a Hadouken.
Welcome into the Worst Wrestling Podcast. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. Today on the show, we got a couple of things. We're going to be looking at kind of just what's going on in wrestling this week. I'll be reviewing MJF versus Will Ospreay because I did sneak that in and watch the entire match right before I got on here. But also the main thing for today, it's been 10 years. We will be reviewing SummerSlam 26, which is from 2013, the one that had the double main event, Brock Lesnar versus CM Punk, and the Yes Movement in full effect, Daniel Bryan versus John Cena. So, just before we get into MJF and Will Ospreay, just kind of looking back on the news and notes of the week and kind of the reactions that people have been having. And if you guys have any questions at all, or you guys want me to hit anything, feel free to leave it in the comments. We will get to it during the show. Shout out to Jerry Bagshaw. Hi, all. Welcome to the Worst Wrestling Podcast. So great to have you. We'll kind of go in reverse order. I think SmackDown, kind of the hot topic right now. And shout out to Santa Zap, a huge creator in the space. I was literally on Twitter right before I jumped on the show, and he basically put out a tweet to the effect of, no matter how bored you were by yesterday's SmackDown, it was like 5 stars compared to the dog shit that we had to live through in 2010. And that was my first thought too. And I will say, granted, I watched it back on Hulu this morning and I did fall asleep watching. So I understand why people are bored. I kind of saw this coming. I predicted that the Bloodline story angle would start to wear thin. It feels like it's jumped the shark. And yeah, at this point, the way you're going to jumpstart it is when Roman does come back. I think obviously you have a lot of interesting angles to work in terms of him coming back to retrieve the head of the table. But the new version of the Bloodline with Solo Sikoa and the Tongas and even with Jacob Fatu, it still feels like it's lacking the star power of the original Bloodline when you talk about Roman Reigns and the Usos. So I don't hate it. I feel like as much as other people, I like where they're going with it, but I don't like where they are with it. It feels like they're spinning their wheels, and until SummerSlam hits, which feels like the next big note, where obviously Cody Rhodes is going to defend. And I think that's part of the problem too, is it's very obvious that Cody is going to defend and retain his title at SummerSlam. So this whole thing of trying to convince the crowd that Solo Sikoa is this like powerful figure in wrestling by just having him beat up Randy Orton and Cody at the end of every show, yeah, it gets stale. I don't think anybody's actually buying into the idea that Solo is a tougher opponent than Roman is, I think, kind of what they're trying to get at. But on Raw, I think Raw is the hot angle right now. And to me, the best storyline in all of wrestling is what's going on with Liv Morgan and Dom Mysterio. And now that Rhea Ripley is back, I love the way that they're paying homage to Eddie Guerrero and China and that angle back in the day. And it's funny because Triple H and Shawn Michaels, you see it a lot in NXT as well. They draw from their own history and experience a lot in their booking. You know, like with the Ethan Page finish to the Fatal 4-Way, that was straight out of the Shawn Michaels playbook. And the Triple H stuff, the way he's booking Liv Morgan and Dom Mysterio to pay homage to the China and Eddie Guerrero angle, fantastic. And the way that Rhea Ripley is involved, and I kind of love that they portrayed this idea that Rhea Ripley isn't even really that mad at Dom necessarily, as much as she's just reclaiming her property. Like the way she phrased it to him of like, you don't own me, Dom. I own you. You belong to me. And even what I thought was funny was the way Dom smiled when she said that. I gotta say, Dom Mysterio might not be able to do a Three Amigos properly, but I actually really love him as a character, and I love a lot of what he's able to do kind of, in his promo work. I think it's really underrated the way he operates in these backstage scenes. I think that's a really an aspect of his game that I think doesn't get highlighted enough, especially because he can't cut a promo because he gets booed mercilessly every time he even tries. And I think the Wyatt Six stuff, because just to touch on that too, because it's funny because just the Will Ospreay MJF match, I think one of the big complaints you heard right away was complaints from fans that it was 60 minutes long, and the immediate pushback of, oh, well, this TikTok generation just can't handle the long-term storytelling. And I actually find that's more present in the Wyatt Six than it is with a match like Ospreay and MJF. And I'll get to why I feel that way later. But sticking to the Wyatt Six stuff, I don't know about you guys, I was moved emotionally by Rowan's promo, specifically discussing the death of Harper and Wyatt, which I think is an emotional subject for a lot of wrestling fans. The way that they are presenting this angle, and I understand that there are people out there that are going to say, well, they're gratuitously using Bray and Brody's death. I don't see it that way because of, again, the attachment and the cathartic release, I think, also of Bo Dallas and Rowan specifically, the way that they are able to entangle their real emotions into the promos and, almost kind of sit on the couch and talk about their true feelings through the lens of professional wrestling. Like, that's what Bray Wyatt was a master of. And I think, Bray and Brody, looking down on them, are extremely proud of the work they're doing right now. And this is the level of cinema that I think AEW honestly could be exploring more. I think they could be doing a better job of, and especially like they've had characters like Matt Hardy, and they've kind of dabbled in it, but they've never really pushed further into more of like the cinematic aspects of professional wrestling. I think they could do more stuff, but I'm really enjoying the way that they're slow burning the Wyatt Six, the way that they're introducing the characters one by one, because they're not just presuming that, every single, again, WWE, I think also people forget, is for a lot more casuals. And so they're not just assuming that every single person is going to automatically know who all of these people are in the Wyatt Six. And I think especially it'll be good for Dexter Lumis and almost said Wayne Gacy. Jesus Christ. Joe Gacy. I think it'll be really good for them, especially because I know that some of the diehards are very familiar with those characters. I think some of the casuals maybe less so, where like, you know, Rowan and Bo Dallas and Nikki Cross are kind of more known to the general fan, I think. But, you know, I'm loving where they're going with this. And I even like the way that instead of having the tape delivered again to Michael Cole this time, they are fucking with Pat McAfee and using his show and platform to kind of spread WWE into a more of a mainstream audience. Because, you know, McAfee's show specifically is for the bros, like the 18 to 35 male contingent of the fan base, like that they do big numbers there. So I really like that they're doing stuff on the Pat McAfee show and kind of entangling real life. But yeah, I think my favorite thing right now in all of WWE is, like I said, the Dom and Liv and Rhea love triangle. And then I love the Wyatt Six stuff. I think the Bloodline stuff's just taking a back seat right now. And kind of frankly, so is SmackDown. So we'll see if, you know, once Roman Reigns comes back, though, believe me, it's going to juice right the fuck up. And I think, just to be clear before we move on here, that they're actually trying to line that up for Survivor Series, I would imagine. I would imagine Survivor Series for War Games, you want Bloodline versus Bloodline. And I've said before, and I'll say again, I'm hoping they do Solo's Bloodline versus Roman and the Usos rejoined. And then I think they bring in The Rock. And the way that you do that match is because there's so much star power on Roman's side, you have to have The Rock turn and essentially align himself with Solo and back Solo as head of the table. And then that's your build now unto WrestleMania. So that's my fantasy booking. But I also think that's kind of where they're maybe going with it. And we see Roman by the time we get to Survivor Series. So before I get into MJF and Will Ospreay, because this is a long-ass match, and so my review is also a little bit lengthy, let's get to some comments. Hey, first-timer, I'm struggling to read this. Brother Contreras, Sportertainment guy. Anyways, shout out to everyone in the chat, including Worst Wrestling Podcast. Keep up good work on the channel. Appreciate it. And shout out from the South Bronx. Yeah. Brother BKL Contreras. Oh, that's what it says. BKL Contreras. Cool. AKA Sportertainment guy. Yeah, that's easier to read without the cursive writing. And then, so shout out to you also. Thank you so much for the comment and for watching. And then Jerry Bagshaw. Tiffy time loses. The Bloodline needs either revamped or split. Everyone's kind of tired of them. Yeah, like I said with the Bloodline, I think they're just spinning the wheels, and Roman is going to come back to reclaim head of the table. They're going to do a whole thing, obviously, with him having to reunite the Usos specifically, which, especially with like a lot of the, you know, turmoil and damage that they've gone through. I could see Sami Zayn even getting involved. I could see an angle where, you know, Roman has to apologize to Sami Zayn in a sense to kind of get through to Jey Uso. I could see that being involved. So I think that it's going to get a lot more interesting, obviously, when Roman Reigns does come back. Until then, though, yeah, we're stuck spinning our wheels with B version of the Bloodline. And then he also said Dom is going to get dumped for the Damian Priest. Yeah, I don't get the vibe of Rhea and Damian Priest being romantically involved. I really thought Damian Priest was going to lose at Money in the Bank. And I actually thought that it would be Finn Balor that would end up costing him the match, so that Finn could cement himself as leader of the Judgment Day, and you would then have Liv Morgan be accepted into the group, so that Liv and Dom would be kind of like the couple right underneath Finn, And then you have obviously his loyal lackey in Big Head McGee there. And then you have Carlito running around in the background too. So that's kind of where I thought they were going with it. It seems like that's on the back burner now. It feels like they're turning. It's weird that it seems like they're turning Damian Priest face and Rhea Ripley face. And so this is obviously going to fracture the Judgment Day because Finn and JD McDonough are still clearly heels. Carlito kind of could go either way, honestly. The crowd loves him so much when he does the comedy bits, as do I. So I don't know if they're just going to split that group in two, and maybe you have Finn, McDonough, Carlito, and Liv and Dom, Finn, McDonough, Carlito. You have them kind of form like a new group, and you have Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley kind of, go off on true solo runs and just kind of like, yeah, we're friends and everything, but we're leaving the group stuff behind us now. So I think that's kind of where they're going with it, but it seems like they're doing the face turn kind of within the group, which I feel like is a little bit underwhelming. I'm not going to lie. All right, we'll get into MJF versus Will Ospreay. Excuse me. This was a match. This was a whole ass match. Look, I want to preface that I thought the actual match itself was incredible. Like, obviously, the skill of the wrestling involved, stupendous. I have this as a 4.5-star match, and I feel like people are going to take that as a slight. First of all, this idea that Meltzer just like has a 5-star ranking system and then just fucks around. He's like 5 3/4 stars. It's like, bro, what is this? Like, what it reminds me of is Dunstan checks in when the hotel is already a 5-star hotel, and then it turns out that the Le Mans people are actually awarding a 6-star this year. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? So, look, on a scale of 5 stars, 5 being the max, I have this as a 4.5-star match. As great as this match was, there was a lot of stupid shit in this match. The main thing was they booked this as a singles match with a time limit of 60 minutes, right? So, and it's like in my mind, and I really hate, and I've said this before, this could apply to any TV show, any movie, any piece of writing. This is actually advice. If you're a writer out there and you watch this back, this is advice as a writer. Do not set up a universe with all these rules and then flagrantly break those rules for no fucking reason with no explanation whatsoever. To the point that I literally wrote a tweet that it could be a fucking drinking game if you just take a shot every time one of the commentary guys has to say the referee is using his discretion because the wrestlers are blatantly breaking the rules in front of him and he's not disqualifying them or counting them out. Like, the amount of times that they had to be like, the referee's using his discretion because this is a championship match. That's why this isn't an obvious count out when they're in the fucking crowd for 5 minutes with MJF getting his fucking head in a trash can and beat up by a little girl. Like, those spots are funny and everything. Do a fucking falls count out anywhere match. Do a fucking no disqualification match. Do anything so that lapse in judgment, I don't have to then make it myself, right? And so that you don't have to have the commentary making stupid fucking comments like the referee is using his discretion here of he's not going to do the fucking 10 count. And then later in the match he starts doing the 10 count. Like, at one point, MJF, this is how nonsensical the 10 count shit was. At one point, MJF, who is the challenger in the match and cannot win via countout, rolls into the ring and asks the referee to count out. Like, what? What are we doing? So there were a ton of spots that were fucking amazing. Like the match itself was amazing. There was no reason for this to be fucking 60 minutes long. I'm sorry. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I won't say that I was bored during the 60 minutes, but I'll give you the reasons why this did not need to be 60 minutes. Number one, this is not a pay-per-view. Pretty fucking simple. You overshadowed your entire show with this match. Now, granted, I didn't have the time before my show jumping on here live to watch the rest of AEW Dynamite. But like I've already shot my wad at this point. I don't know if I'm even going to watch the rest of the show because like, yeah, the match was fantastic. I got everything I needed from this show. It was an hour fucking long. Like, do I really need to tune in to watch I was about to say Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné and Nyla Rose for her ABS whatever the fuck championship? No, I don't give a shit. And the crazy part is Okada and Swerve are on this card as an afterthought, right? They keep saying it over and over. The first time ever, we're going to have our AEW heavyweight championship versus like basically the only other free agent we got as big as Will Ospreay. And it's a complete afterthought on the card. Like I'm sure it was a great match. I haven't seen anybody talking about it. Not a fucking, I haven't seen nobody on Twitter, no one on Facebook. Yo, Swerve's entire title run basically has been an afterthought. Like the way he's booked on the show has been an afterthought since he won the belt. And it's like, if you were going to do that, that's fine. There was no reason to give away then the singles match between Swerve and Okada just for shits and giggles. Like, you could have just as easily, and the crazy part is they even set it up earlier on the show. You could have had a 6-man tag. You could have just had Swerve and the Acclaimed, who literally interacted backstage after the Ospreay match. You could have had them versus the Elite, Young Bucks and Okada. And then it's okay, fine. It's a blow-off match because we had our crazy hour-long match at the top of the show, because this is AEW Dynamite 250. Fine, perfect. That works. Again, it's this idea of like, we're going to have that match at the beginning, but then we're going to have our fucking main champion, who honestly, based on this show, if I was a casual, if this was my first time watching AEW, I would have no idea that Swerve was your main champion. I would think that you just had your main championship basically go over on like I would think that MJF was your main champion now, basically, based on watching this show. And again, you designed the show in a way where it's like you're almost asking people to tune out after this match because it's a huge fucking like it's not just a huge match in terms of like the amount of time and the moves and the back and forth. It's the energy that you pull from the crowd, but also from the TV audience. Like, yeah, maybe I was like super into this. But then, you know what I mean? Like now, that extra hour, I don't know about that. I'm just going to dip on out of here. So, and then in terms of like the actual match, I get the lamentations of AEW just kind of looks like a video game when I watched these guys basically kill each other for an hour with like 17 finishers, and at the very end, Ospreay basically decides he's not going to use the one that injured Daniel Bryan and then gets popped with a ring, and that's the end of the match after 59 minutes and 58 seconds. Like, you had a crossroads, you had a tombstone pile driver, you had the Styles Clash on the apron. Like, those are crazy spots. But and then there was a part where like in the middle of the match, like this was like a movie. This was like movie shit. This is straight out of Blade. This happens in Blade, like scene by scene of Ospreay is like holding his shoulder because his shoulder is like dislocated and he needs the doctor to put it back in the socket. And the way they did it looked fake as fuck. Like, if you know anything about like actually fighting with an injury like that, the way the doctor just like shook his arm a couple times and then yanked on it, like that's not how you reset a shoulder. Even in, and if you did that, by the way, like you would not then be able to wrestle for 30 more minutes with a fucking shoulder that was just separated and reset for you, because it would just pop right back out and you'd be fucked. So like there's a level of realism, and again, it's like I can suspend my disbelief to a certain extent, and it's like a movie, and I get that, so I'm not that mad at it. But it is like, again, it's the idea of like, well, this is like if on Monday Night Raw, fucking you just had Cody Rhodes and I don't know, Seth Rollins. I mean, they've had a million matches. Who's like a fucking dream match that they would have? Oh, Cody Rhodes and like Ilya Dragunov, or like Braun Breaker or Walter fucking Gunther or something like that. Like just have that match. You pop it on Raw for an hour, and like halfway through the match, like Cody's literally like getting fucking limbs reset by the doc and then going back in for another 30. Like I feel like there is a lot of tribalism where it's like AEW can't do any wrong to AEW fans. WWE can't do any wrong to WWE fans. And it's like, no, what's stupid on one show is stupid on another show. And, this idea that like Buddy's getting his fucking shoulder reset in the middle of the match. I mean, if you want to have that spot be near the end of the match. Like if you have that spot where it's like, and then a couple minutes later, I think a better way of doing the end of the match, as opposed to Ospreay having moral qualms about using the Tiger Driver on an asshole like MJF, like just have it to where you have that shoulder resetting spot like a couple minutes before, and then when he goes for the Tiger Driver, literally his shoulder gives out and then MJF pops him with the ring. There you go. There's your match end. So I think the biggest thing for me, and again, this was still a fantastic match. I feel like it sounds like I'm shitting on it. The actual match was still incredible. They left all of themselves out in the ring. The crowd was absolutely ruckus and into this match for it being in Little Rock, Arkansas. So, I mean, there was still a lot of great things about this match. There's a reason I still had it at 4.5 stars out of 5. But I think the big thing for me was, again, the idea that you set this up as a singles match, and it essentially turned into like a Falls Count Anywhere, no DQ, all out brawl, to where you had that anytime you have to have commentary explain after the fact a bunch of shit that doesn't make any sense. It's like you should have just set that up before the match then, right? You should have just had it be like, and it's funny because they did that on SummerSlam, actually, the one that I'm going to review right after this, where it was like they just announced earlier in the show that, oh yeah, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar actually going to be no DQ. Like all you had to do was have fucking Tony Khan or literally anybody come out and say, oh, actually this match, you know what? It's going to be no DQ. Have MJF, even better, have MJF get on the mic and talk shit to Will Ospreay and convince him to make it a no DQ match, which would obviously favor MJF because he cheats like a motherfucker, right? Like there's so many little things that you could have done to just kind of explain away these like massive gaps in fucking common sense that I have to then fill myself as a fan, where it's like, that's the half star to me. It's like, it's fine to go fight 5 minutes in the crowd. It's not when the fucking referee is like deciding that he's not going to do the count out, but then like literally fucking 5 minutes later in the match, and it's crazy the way that it's happening too. It's like MJF is like climbing the rope to go drop that elbow on the to Ospreay on the table, which already technically I feel like is a disqualification. Like as soon as he hits the elbow through the table, technically shouldn't he get disqualified, right? It's like, okay, fine, let's set that part aside. Now while MJF is in the ring and Ospreay's out of the ring, the ref starts counting 1, 2. He's doing the count. and then he hits the elbow, and then the ref immediately gets out of the ring to like go check on them, and he's like checking on them for like an inordinate amount of time. He's there for like a hot minute before he finally decides he's going to go back in the ring and start the count again. So it's just over and over, like the way that the ref just and the way that they just explain it of like again, anytime anything fucks up where it's like they're outside of the ring or a clear disqualification or they're like the referee is using his discretion because it's a championship match. Go fuck yourself. All right. Hey, shout out to Matros Keto and Wrestling. Good evening. And Jerry, shout out to you being hospitable, saying hello to Matt. We will get into our review for SummerSlam 26. So let me just pop this up on my phone. I just watched this the other day, actually. So if you haven't seen it, last week, dealing with a lot of challenges. I'm going through a big move. My wife, her residency was approved, so she's moving to Canada. Been getting the house ready. Last week, unfortunately, couldn't make the live. I did end up popping in a bonus episode the next day. So if you did miss it, first of all, my apologies for not making the live last week. But also, please go check out that episode. I did top 10 SummerSlam matches, which inspired the second half of this show, because two of those matches that made the top 10 were from the same pay-per-view. And I was like, oh, damn, this must have been like a really good pay-per-view. And maybe it was even the best SummerSlam ever. And I don't know that it actually was the best SummerSlam ever. I think it just depends on your age. I think the nostalgia factor kicks in a lot. And, you know, I will say that for myself, this felt like the best SummerSlam ever. And it really wasn't at the time. And I think it's funny how nostalgia can play a huge factor on your perception of things. And, you know, the first match is like very indicative of that. But before we even get into that, you know, the showrunner and everything is going on, and they actually opened the show with a rendition of the national anthem, and it was JoJo that came out. So I was like, oh shit. And then you had Cole, JBL, and Jerry Lawler on commentary. This was in Los Angeles, California. So you had The Miz hosting, and there was this funny bit where Fandango kept interrupting him. But we get the first match. And again, the emotion for me was already kind of running high after the anthem with JoJo. And I'd also completely forgotten that this match was on the card. But it was Bray Wyatt's first match in WWE, the Ring of Fire match, which I think this match in particular was really indicative of Bray Wyatt's early struggles in WWE, because the idea of the match in theory, and I think, again, the way that I could picture them talking about it and setting it up backstage, in theory, everything sounded great. And then, unfortunately, in execution, this match was definitely lacking. I remember, watching it back, I can see and remember why people shit on this match so much. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie, though. I was in full fucking tears just by the fact of, you know, when they did the entrance, the original entrance for the Wyatt family, and you see Bray and Brody. I feel like it takes a toll. If you were a fan during that era, and especially if you were a fan of Bray Wyatt, this is one that is, you know, it's fun to watch back for nostalgia's sake, but it also strikes a chord, I think. And again, the fact that this was Bray's first match in WWE, and it was a fucking Ring of Fire match against Kane at SummerSlam, again, foreshadowing what would be the rest of his career. But again, in theory, it was a great idea. In practice, though, unfortunately, looked like shit. And it was because, first of all, you had Rowan and Harper kind of bumbling around the outside of the ring, where they were trying to get in the ring. There's this one part where Harper's trying to pass a kendo stick through the flames and through the ropes to Bray Wyatt. And I think the idea was supposed to be that the flames would shoot up and light the kendo stick on fire, but the kendo stick definitely was not on fire. It was smoking a little bit, and then Harper drops it, and you see the guy run over with the fire extinguisher and sprays the kendo stick that's very clearly not on fire. So like this has already turned into a comedy bit at this point. At one point though, Kane hits like triple choke slams and it looks like he's going to win the match. But then all of a sudden, Harper and Rowan find an asbestos blanket that they throw over the fire, which allows them to get in the ring, which again defeats the whole purpose of the match, which was to keep them out of the ring. But they go in, they mug Kane, they beat the shit out of him. Bray hits Sister Abigail for the win. And then they pull him out of the ring. They pull Kane out of the ring and they drag him over. And they have like the bottom half of the stairs set up and they kind of put Kane on there and then they go grab the top half and they slam it down. But it's like the V part that they slam down. So, I mean, like the way they shoot the camera angle wasn't bad where it actually looked okay. But like, again, you just know as a fan, like, oh, you didn't hit him for real. But it still looked fine. It was whatever. And they, and then they drag Kane off into the back to do some weird rituals and shit. But again, like the match itself sucked. There's no way around it. The execution of it was lacking, but I could see the idea of it, right? Especially like, the one thing I did like was a lot of the times when they would hit a slam, the flames would kind of shoot up, which was a cool effect. I thought the way that they kind of played the match off, it felt like as the flames got bigger, Kane became more powerful, which I thought was a nice little bit of kayfabe. But ultimately, like, yeah, I mean, the fact that they just threw a fucking blanket over the fire at the end and then just hopped in the ring and mugged them, it was kind of a shitty ending. But watching it back, I felt like it was better than I remembered. But I do think a lot of that obviously plays on the nostalgia factor and the love for, Bray and Brody and Rowan and that original trio and remembering the debut of the Wyatt family and, what they would go on to do in professional wrestling. So, kudos to the match, even though it wasn't the greatest match ever. Like I think I remember it more fondly than, other bad matches, to put it bluntly. After that, we got the Paul Heyman promo, which was setting up the match of Best versus Beast. He would declare it to be a no disqualification match. And then, does anybody out there remember that Damien Sandow was a Money in the Bank winner? This was a hilarious match. It was Damien Sandow versus Cody Rhodes. And it's funny because, like, I actually remember this lead up because they were a tag team as the Rhodes Scholars, and they broke up, and Cody threw Sandow's Money in the Bank briefcase like into the river, and when they were like on a show in Mexico or something like that, and and so Sandow's now carrying around this like brown leather briefcase of the Money in the Bank, and he's got it like handcuffed to him. But ultimately, the match is Damien Sandow versus Cody Rhodes. Pretty standard match. It was funny watching like early day Cody Rhodes compared to the Homelander version that is today. But Cody would hit a muscle buster, a disaster kick for a near fall, and ultimately would hit the crossroads for the win. So solid match there. We don't need to spend too much time. But again, just nostalgic and funny to see. It was, again, the very early stage of Cody Rhodes. I think this was even before like he did all the dashing stuff, definitely before the Stardust stuff. Then we got Alberto Del Rio versus Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship. This match was a fucking banger. First of all, Alberto Del Rio, as much as he is a piece of shit, this guy was a phenomenal wrestler. I think it makes it like even more of a fall from grace of just how fucking good Alberto Del Rio was. And like if he had not been like a shitty human being, I think he could still be having like 5-star matches in WWE. It wasn't 5-star, it's damn fucking close. Like this was a great fucking match. Christian at this point was doing some of the best work of his career. This is, I think we're a year or two removed at this point from the World Heavyweight title match against Randy Orton at SummerSlam. So yeah, Christian just fucking doing some of his best work of his career. But ultimately, Alberto would go over in this match and retain the World Heavyweight Championship. But yeah, very underrated match. And I think, really set up a good buzz kind of for the rest of the card. Then we got a hilarious match of Brie Bella versus Natalia. This was definitely show filler, but it was funny to see Natalia was backed up by the Funkadactyls. Remember Naomi and Cameron when they were the Funkadactyls? And then you had Brie Bella was backed up by obviously her sister Nikki Bella and Eva Marie. So kind of a throwback here. But yeah, Brie Bella versus Natalia. I mean, it was a match. It happened. It was fine. Natalia ultimately won with a sharpshooter. So we can just move right along. And then we got this hilarious backstage segment of heel Ryback in the back complaining about catering and picking on the catering guy, bitching about the gazpacho. Yeah. He's like, Ryback, big guy doesn't like cold soup. Feed me more. Oh my God. This segment was fucking horrendous. Really funny to just shit on Ryback because he is such a fucking clown in the IWC. He can go back to blocking me if he wants because he blocked me, then unblocked me. He did that to a lot of creators and fans in general. He can go back to blocking me anytime he wants. Fuck that guy. But yeah, this was a dumb fucking segment, but it was really funny just to kind of see him doing this like stupid bully shtick. Just awful stuff. That was like straight out of the Vince McMahon playbook. Especially with like the Be a Star program stuff that they were doing at the time. The commentary even mentioned it too, of like, well, I guess Ryback's not into the Be a Star stuff. Then we got one of the two main events on the card. We got the Best versus the Beast. CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar. And this was an absolutely stellar match. Punk took an absolute beating in this match, but Brock Lesnar also sold like a motherfucker. This is Brock Lesnar when he's at his peak. I feel like it's when he's wrestling smaller dudes that know how to actually really wrestle. Like if you think about a lot of Brock's best matches, like Brock versus Kurt Angle, Brock versus Daniel Bryan, Brock versus AJ Styles, Brock versus CM Punk. When Brock really wants to work with you, you're going to have a fucking hell. Even Brock versus Seth Rollins. I don't want to leave that one out. But this was a crazy fucking match. Paul Heyman actively involved in the story of this match before, during, and after, which I thought was great because of the tie-in that they were both Paul Heyman guys And I think this match really is a credit to CM Punk too, because I think nowadays with all of the controversy and unfortunately with the injuries, and I know it still creeps up, but like I think people kind of forget just how fucking good CM Punk was. And if you really want to know, go back and watch this match. Although I will say there was some foreshadowing because in the promo that Heyman cut earlier in the show that declared there's no disqualification, he said Brock Lesnar was going to beat CM Punk so bad he would leave WWE, and then he did. I don't think they were actually related. I think it was Punk was dealing with a lot of different issues. I think this match was almost like an exception to the rule, where I think maybe he would have been in a way disappointed he wasn't the main event, but I think he would have been okay with it because it was Daniel Bryan. And if it had been anybody else, I think he kind of would have been pissy about it like usual. But again, just getting back to the actual match, Punk took a beating, but then he finally is able to get a steel chair and he gives Brock a beating. Punk keeps trying to get Paul Heyman, but he keeps getting intercepted by Brock Lesnar. There's this great spot at one point where Brock goes for a F5 and CM Punk is just holding on a dear life for Paul Heyman's tie. And Brock's like wrenching at him, like, let him go. And he actually drops him, trying to get him off Heyman. And then Punk counters and then ends up hitting a go to sleep. And Heyman breaks up that pinfall. And so Heyman just, again, keeps getting involved over and over. And there's finally this moment where Brock is down and CM Punk has Paul Heyman, punches him smack in the face, sticks him in the Anaconda Vice. But then Brock comes over and absolutely wallops him with the steel chair, just destroys him. And then hits the F5 on the steel chair, and that's the end of the match. But man, I feel like I'm underselling it. This was a back and forth match, lots of near finishes. Punk looked amazing in the match. So did Brock. This was Brock too, shortly after coming back from the UFC, but it was before obviously ending the Undertaker's streak, which would then set him on a path of destruction that we wouldn't see until we got Tribal Chief Roman Reigns. Like, if you think about the most dominant characters since like the run of the Attitude Era, it was John Cena and Randy Orton kind of going back and forth, and then you had the Brock Lesnar run, and then you had Roman Reigns. And that's kind of been, if you think about like the Mount Rushmore of like who were the figureheads through those eras. But yeah, absolutely crazy match. One of the best Brock Lesnar matches. And I think underrated too is one of CM Punk's best matches. Then we got a little bit of filler and a lot more nostalgia. We got Big E and AJ Lee teaming up against Dolph Ziggler and Caitlyn. So I have no recollection of Caitlyn. Caitlyn is whoever this lady was. She was scrubbed from my memory. So shout out to y'all if you remember Caitlyn. Let us know in the comments. But yeah, this was just a filler match, unfortunately, after the main event and between the Daniel Bryan main event. I will say, watching this back, I was like, oh, I remember why I had such a crush on AJ Lee, because she is one saucy little minx. But no, young Big E, it was really nice to watch a young Big E match back. The way he was whipping Dolph Ziggler around, who sells like $1 million too. I really loved watching the match again just for nostalgia's sake, as opposed to like, you know, obviously it wasn't the greatest match in the world. Dolph Ziggler ended up winning on a zigzag. It was pretty standard paint by numbers filler match, but it was fun to watch. And I think the one thing that I remembered was it's a shame that AJ Lee didn't get more of an opportunity, I think, in the 4 Horsewoman era, because she would be amazing to watch in the ring now versus like a Becky Lynch, a Bayley, a Charlotte Flair. Why am I forgetting the fourth one now? She's not there anymore. That's why Mercedes Moné. But, you know, against that, like, really top-end women's athlete competition, I think it's a shame that we never got to see AJ Lee, unfortunately, compete kind of at that level. You know, she was very much there during the Divas era. And I think there were underrated wrestlers during that era, but it obviously wasn't at the level that it is now. And finally, we get into John Cena versus the Beard, Daniel Bryan, full throes of the Yes Movement. And this was a fantastic match. I think the showrunner for this match was just as important as the match itself in terms of telling the story. And I think this is where I feel like WWE and AEW kind of tell their stories very differently. And they built this over time. And if you remember the showrunner and the build up to the actual match itself, because I feel like people remember the turn after the fact. But the showrunner was fantastic in setting up the match because the build to the match was Vince McMahon and his involvement in the Daniel Bryan run and John Cena's decision. So the way this plays out is John Cena was asked to come out and pick anybody on the roster that he wanted to have the main event match for the WWE Championship at SummerSlam, and he picked Daniel Bryan. And Vince McMahon basically came out and said, I do not want you, John Cena, to be the champion. I want Daniel Bryan to be the champion even less. So obviously, and you had Brad Maddox, who at that time was the GM, the general manager for Raw. So you essentially had Brad Maddox and Vince McMahon operating as heel figures to prevent this match from happening. And on the flip side, you actually had Triple H as the representative of the board. He was already at that time no longer really an active wrestler. He did still have matches here and there, but he wasn't on the active roster. He was already kind of in the CEO role, the authority figure role. But at that point, he was actually backing Daniel Bryan. He was saying, you know, Daniel Bryan represents the future of the WWE. He was the face character that was pushing to have this be just a fair match between John Cena and Daniel Bryan. And, you know, you had the segment where to kind of finalize things, Vince McMahon comes out and says Brad Maddox is going to be special guest referee for this match. Then Triple H comes out, pedigrees Brad Maddox and says, actually, Vince, I think you meant to say I will be the special guest referee and we'll call this down the middle. And so that was actually what set up Triple H's involvement and why he was the special guest referee, was because it was this idea of he was also able to act as an enforcer and keep any outside influence from Vince McMahon away from the match so that we could have a real decision, right? Beautiful setup for when you consider what happened after the fact. So you get the actual match, and Triple H, impartial referee the entire time. This was a white hot crowd, especially coming off the CM Punk Brock Lesnar match earlier in the night. Absolutely 100% in Daniel Bryan's corner. Sometimes you get the let's go Cena sucks. This was a very small contingent of Cena fans on this evening. Like, I would put it in the 5% of the crowd. Like 95% of the crowd is behind Daniel Bryan in this one. And this is even before the whole lead up to WrestleMania. So, man, I almost feel like I got to go watch back WrestleMania 30 after this. I've seen it so many times that I almost have it ingrained in memory, but I'm juicing myself up to where I might watch it anyways. But the actual match itself, like I said, amazing match. They were telling the story essentially of Cena's power versus Daniel Bryan's speed and technique. Cena also wrestled this match with a swollen elbow, so Daniel Bryan obviously was attacking the elbow during the match, setting up the label lock or the yes lock, which it had become known by at that point. Fantastic match. It actually ends up ending on a knee, on the flying knee. Kind of almost comes out of nowhere, the finish, and it's a clean finish in the middle of the ring. 1, 2, 3, and you have Triple H raising Daniel Bryan's hand. You have this moment after the match. John Cena pays his respects, shakes his hand. You have Triple H again holding up his hand around, shakes Daniel Bryan's hand, and you have the confetti. You have the fireworks. You had this was everything except for the fucking logo popping up like the Ciampa betrayal. Like literally, the show's over. There's confetti falling. There's fireworks. Everything. Triple H has raised his hand already. And then you hear it. I hear voices in my head. Randy Orton's music hits. And the crowd immediately is like, oh no. And it's like slow motion. And it's funny because, they set it up to where actually Randy kind of slithers down to the ring, teases almost like he's going to get in, and then he fucks off back up the ramp. And Daniel Bryan is ready. He's challenging Randy Orton. He's like, bring it on, man. I'll do it. And then Triple H spins him around, hits him with the pedigree, and Randy comes in and hands the briefcase, and the fix is in, and he rolls him over, and it's great. You think almost for a moment that Daniel Bryan's going to kick out, and then Randy's going to have to actually put him down with another RKO, but no, he doesn't even have it in him to kick out, and it's just a 1, 2, 3. Randy doesn't even have to do anything. Literally didn't have to do a single move. Just rolled him over, and he took his belt. And the way the crowd felt, the way the air was sucked out of the building, the way commentary, the way Michael Cole especially sold the betrayal. Ooh, this was wrestling. This was professional wrestling. God damn. This is goosebump shit. And the fact that now also with recidivist history that this would lead to arguably the greatest WrestleMania main event of all time, with the triple threat of Daniel Bryan versus Batista versus Randy Orton, and Daniel Bryan winning, and maybe in this generation, arguably the greatest WrestleMania moment of all time. Yeah, this SummerSlam, I think, no matter what, would rank highly on most lists. But I think for me, I would have to go back and watch a bunch more to really get a true sense. But man, this was a really good one, and I think it could be argued the greatest SummerSlam of all time. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and watching the show. Shout out to everybody in the comments. Jerry Bagshaw. Let me pull this up again. Brother BKL Contreras and Matt Troaz, Keto and Wrestling, and Jerry Bagshaw again. Thank all of you for joining the stream tonight and for watching. For anyone else who catches this maybe later, shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have ideas for show topics, if you have questions that you want to send into the show, hit me up on all of my socials at Jack Lucenay. And also help the algorithm, help support the show. Super kick that subscribe button, maybe drop some comments. And until the next time, I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
My positive contact results in affirmative impact. Never polarize on raps. I'm never primitive, but cannibalistic, vicious characteristics, hereditary potency, episodic genes, yo. Empathy, HMCs at extraordinary speed. Some of me is like, some of them razor blades and grease in your bare feet. I see your fucking colleagues misprise you very much, so you're just
shakes.